Let me introduce Kalyani. Let me introduce Kalyani Garimella ma'am. She is a distinguished counseling psychologist, special educator, and life coach with over 24 years of expertise in education and 12 years specializing in counseling and special education. Kalyani ma'am brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to her work. She is the founder of Clover Learning Center in Hyderabad, where she tirelessly dedicates herself to empower individuals through counseling, coaching, and mentorship as well. Kalyani ma'am, she is not only a practitioner but also a dedicated researcher in her field. She is currently pursuing her PhD from BST Innovation University. Her passion for holistic education and mental well-being is evident in her experience conducting workshops and training sessions in various aspects of life and education. So today, ma'am is going to talk about mental health and its stigma around it. She is going to explain uh, that there's a lot of stigma around the mental health and how and what can be done to destigmatize mental health issues. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you so much for the introduction. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be, addressing such a wonderful audience today. I'm really excited, looking forward to having a good session. Okay, so I'm already sharing my screen, I guess, and I'll try to do a slideshow. Okay, is that this better?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Visible? Yeah. So, welcome to day 2 of the talk series, all of you. So here I have a quick question for all of you and a small disclaimer that I'm not an expert in, like about stigma. It's a subject which I have just, out of my own interest, I have studied. So we have to find the solutions. I'm not focusing on the solutions so much, but more on, insight and just giving my views and my this thing. But like it's not like I'm a medical professional or somebody who is an expert in this area in this subject. But yes, I would. There's lots of things which I have uh, tried to in this thing here, and I'll try to make it. Though it's a very serious topic, I'll try to make it as interactive as possible. So we start with a question for the audience. What do you, when I say the word stigma, what are the words which come to your mind? So either we do it, raise your hands and do it in the chat box, or you can unmute, and I think we will have to unmute you. You can type in the chat box.
If you raise hand, we'll unmute now.
Yes, sir. That's better.
Either
That's
do
better.
this or
Yeah, that's better. Thank you. And I also look at the chat.
Vijaya says loneliness.
Loneliness. Yes, yes. One word. And all of you can just give one word. Raise your hand. We can unmute you.
One word, please. One word.
Anybody else? Or we can just move on. Okay, I think I'll
Then move on now.
move on. Yes, yes, I'll move on. So,
Akhil says social deficiency. Thank you, Akhil.
yeah, so
Harikumar
I've gone to
says
the,
it's a blind opinion.
okay, okay. So, okay, I've moved on to the next slide where I'm giving you the answer. Stigma is a definition given by Corrigan and Penn. I'll talk about Corrigan, more about, the psychologist Corrigan a little later. This is the definition given by him, saying stigma refers to a set of negative attitudes and beliefs that motivate individuals which make them fear, rejection, avoidance, and discrimination against people with mental illness. Uh, a stigma is actually, in simple terms, it is a set of negative and unfair thoughts and beliefs that people have about something. Something could be about, themselves, or it could be about others. It could be like that. So it could be about an institution also. So a stigma is a set of negative and unfair thoughts and beliefs that people have uh, them about something. So it is supposed to be a mark, a stain. So these are the synonyms actually, which we're looking for: stain or blemish, a kind of disgrace, associated with a particular quality, circumstance, or person. And it comes from a Greek word, and stigma actually means to pierce or make a hole. So stigma is something which is piercing to, I feel it's like, to the soul more than the body. Okay. So why do we have to understand stigma? Why are we doing this? Because stigma plays a major role in the prevention and treatment of mental illness, because it's a major hurdle uh, for mental professionals to prevent or cure mental illness, treat mental illness, because it stops, it's a block. It stops us from, because the person is not ready for the treatment. So stigma is very important to understand stigma, because it is blocking the prevention and treatment of mental illness. So that is why we need to study. And dealing with stigma sometimes could be much more difficult than dealing with the illness itself. The illness could be just anxiety, but if the stigma is much more, then it becomes very difficult for us to uh, deal or handle that situation for that person. So we need to study, and we also need to study the extent of stigma in the society, which is actually very much there. But because a lot of people don't open up, the main thing about stigma is people don't want to talk about it. So we need to study the extent of stigma in the society, for which we have to make people talk about it openly. So stigma leads to labeling. The lot of labeling happens in either by public or by self, by institutions. There's a lot of prejudice around stigma. Then there's discrimination because of stigma. There are stereotypes, and which leads to self-harm. So what we're trying to understand here is, why is learning about stigma so important? And as psychologists, we can prevent self-harm, which is created because of stigma. So we need to create a lot of awareness and try to mitigate the impact of stigma and help as many people as we can. Now, what are the mental illnesses and disorders which are associated with stigma? What are these disorders which usually, I know there's a lot of stigma around these. One is most common ones are anxiety disorders, like borderline personality disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. Depression, very common. Stigma attached to depression is very, very much there. OCD, schizophrenia, autism, bipolar disorder, and intellectual disabilities. Intellectual disabilities could be, where the person has a borderline IQ or MR, intellectually disabled. So they also go through a lot of stigma. Now, history. Why do we need to understand, why do we need to know about the history of stigma? Is because the stigma, the way it was dealt with earlier was very sad, actually. For millions of years, society treated people suffering from depression and all the mental illnesses as, like, they were like treated very, very badly, like slaves or criminals. They were imprisoned, tortured, or killed also sometimes. They were sterilized. All kinds of torture was done, and The belief was that they are possessed by the devil, so they were either burnt, thrown into places, asylums. They were chained to the walls, to beds, because they were treated as a threat to society. They were fully discriminated, and they were they were treated as if they're criminals who are a threat to society. So because of that, I think because of all this history, even now the stigma exists. To a large extent it's lesser, but then it's still there. So then gradually what happened was, stigma did change. I mean, the way it was treated did change a bit, but still it was there. The discrimination was still there, and it reached an unfortunate peak during the you know how much of discrimination was happening during the Nazi reign, where in Germany, where hundreds of thousands of mentally ill people were just killed, or they were put in prisons, tortured. They were, you know, how they treated the zoos. So all this was there. I mean, because of all this, there's a lot of fear still. There's so much of fear. That is why the stigma still exists. Here, covering my PPT. Okay. So what are the myths and facts with regard to mental health, which have led to stigma? So mental health is caused because of people not being able to, this is the myth, okay? These are the myths that mental health is caused because people are not being able to control their emotions. Okay, so when people are not, it's a belief, myth that the people who can't control their emotions are mentally ill. So that is one myth, which is not true, obviously. Having extreme anxiety at times is fine and can be overcome. Means anxiety is there. I mean, people do get anxious, and it is okay, and it can be overcome, which is a myth. I mean, it's not treated as a mental illness, but it is not true, actually. It could be a problem. And people with mental health conditions just need to snap out of it. Means it is like they don't need any they don't need any help, or they're just pretending, or they're just acting out. So these are the some of the beliefs which have been there about mental illness, which have led to more of the stigma. Mental illness is contagious, and this is very a weird thing, but yes, people believe that if you are working with people in mental illness, or you are a mental health professional, then it will pass on to you. That is why a lot of parents don't encourage their children studying psychology, because they say, oh, I mean, you might also become mentally ill and all that. So these are the myths which revolve around mental health, which have led to the stigma. Then what are the facts when compared to the myths? Mental illness is not a chronic disease. This is a fact which has to be explained and told to everyone. It could happen to anyone. Mental illness is something which could happen to anyone. It is not based on any particular thing, and it can be reversed and prevented with professional help. So it's not like once you somebody has a mental illness doesn't mean it is at least it can be reduced, it can be mitigated, if not completely cured. Yeah, there are certain illnesses which cannot be completely cured, we know that, but they can be reduced and reversed to a large extent with professional help. Okay, prevalence. So, I mean, we would all like to know the extent of stigma attached to mental illness. It has been widely studied, but the exact figures are not known. So I didn't want to put it here, mention it here, because every study is giving different figures. So, and it also varies from place to place, because the main problem is many people don't speak about it. A large percentage of people are going through mental, illnesses of various degrees and types, but they don't want to speak about it. And that is the main issue. I mean, because of that, uh, we can't actually figure out what is the prevalence, what is the percentage. So, but we all know that it is pervasive, and there are many people who need help, and they were not talking about it. Most people do not want to talk about it because of the stigma attached, and we'll see why. Okay, so what are the red flags? What are the symptoms attached to stigma? I mean, how do you make out a person is stigmatized and going through stigma? Is the first thing is the person becomes very negative. It's always like there's something wrong with me, and because of what others are saying or because of what the person is feeling, she or he is feeling himself. So one is a lot of negative thoughts are there. So that is one red flag. Then there's limited social interaction. They don't want to talk to, they avoid talking to people and interacting socially. Isolation, which leads to isolation and loneliness. We know that. Then there's a lot of fear of judgment, fear of uh, uh, talking to anybody, fear of being labeled, fear of being discriminated. So there's a lot of fear in a person who is going through stigma and feeling of inadequacy. Yeah, that is also there. They feel low self-esteem. That is what it's a vicious cycle where because of low self-esteem, they feel more stigmatized. So it is a vicious cycle because of the fear, you have the stigma, and because of the stigma, again, you're feel inadequate. So with the feeling of inadequacy, there's very low self-esteem, which also, then there could be anxiety, there could be shame. Yes, they feel that there's something wrong with me. I'm not normal. I'm not like the others. Just because they're going through a mental illness, which could be a temporary thing. But the stigma itself becomes so large sometimes that it becomes larger than the illness itself. That is the sad part of stigma. Then there is guilt because they are not able to maybe express themselves. They're not able to interact with other people. They're not able to be, a normal uh, like the others. So they feel guilty and they're not able to talk to people. All these things make them feel very guilty and inadequate. Then despair, hopelessness. Uh, uh, they keep saying that, I can't do anything. I am not as good enough as my other colleagues or friends or whatever. So they keep comparing themselves. So all these could be the red flags which we can look out for if we're trying to help somebody. Types of stigma. Yeah, this is very important. What are the main types of stigma which we can come across are self stigma is when we are having negative thoughts and beliefs about our own mental illness, which is the worst kind of stigma because then it becomes very difficult to help that person. So first we have to get that person out of that self, then only we'll be able to help the person. So that self stigma is all the negative thoughts and beliefs one has about their own condition. Public stigma is when negative attitude and reactions are shown by others towards people with mental illness. Public, like anybody, it could be anybody from the society. So that is public stigma. Stigma by association is friends and family go through experience the uh, impact of stigma because of somebody who has mental illness in the family. Like your close family members also might go through stigma and they don't want to talk about it because of the stigma they are feeling. Even if it is there, I mean, they are aware, but they don't want to talk about it. So that is stigma by association, means you're associated, you're connected with somebody who has mental illness, and so you are feeling the stigma more than could be that more than the person himself. That is one kind of stigma. Then the fourth one is institutional stigma, where uh, wherever you're going, like, you suppose a person with mental illness is going for a job or for an admission, and they find you different, or you have been diagnosed with something, and they discriminate. The institution or the organization may discriminate you, and then that is called an institutional stigma. Means the institutions and organizations like maybe refuse to give you admission or refuse to give you a job opportunity, because they might feel you're a threat to the organization. You might be a threat, potential threat to the organization, because of which they might discriminate the person. Okay, now what are the stages? These are stages in general of stigma. So initially, there's a lot of shame. Then there is isolation because of the shame. Like you feel, suppose you have a borderline personality disorder, suppose, or bipolar, and you're aware, because of which, so you feel very low, and you feel something is wrong with me. So you're very scared to talk to people, and you're going into a shell. You want to be isolated, so that because of all the shame you're feeling, so you want to be isolated, you don't want to interact with anyone. So then there's a lot of fear. Next thing is fear and guilt, which because of the shame, isolation, and all that, you also scared, so you don't want to talk about it. Then because of which there's low self-esteem. You don't feel good about yourself. You feel incompetent. You don't want to do anything. You feel incapable. You just feel that I just can't do anything. I mean, I am not capable of doing anything. So you go through severe low self-esteem, then which might lead to depression. So this could be the order in which, stigma does happen. And then despair, because of depression, slowly you become, you feel you're worthless, you are not capable, and you are more and more going inside, withdrawn and isolated. And when you feel so hopeless and you're going through so much of despair, you feel your life is not worth, because you don't have a purpose, in life. You don't have any more goals in life. You feel you can't do anything, so there's no goal. So then it might lead to self-harm, which could be the last stage of stigma. So you might want to, you might have ideation towards suicidal thoughts and ideation. Okay, now what could lead to stigma is ignorance, because you are not aware, you're not aware that it is, you don't have enough knowledge about the mental illness you're going through. So you feel that there is no way out, there is no cure, there is no reversal, there is no treatment. So ignorance, basically you don't have the knowledge about the condition, your condition, and so you give up. You feel you cannot do anything, so which could lead to stigma. Then depression, of course, is a major cause which leads to stigma. Trauma, you could have gone through some trauma, some death of a near dear one, or a loss of something, which could lead to, again, stigma. Like, okay, I have done something, like I knew of a case where a child, I mean, he was a teenager, and unfortunately, his father-in-law committed suicide. The grandfather committed suicide, and he somehow felt he was responsible for it. So like that, that was a trauma which he was going through. Like that, of course, he couldn't talk to anybody about it. He couldn't tell. Then somehow he was close to me, and he told me, that because I believe his grandfather asked him for a rope the previous day, and he gave it to him. That was the problem, and he felt that, I'm responsible for what happened. So he went through a lot of PTSD. So these things, do happen. Then sometimes it's bullying, physical harassment, which could lead to stigma. You don't want to talk about it. Then there are addictions, of course, substance abuse, addictions, which could lead to a stigma. Then sexual abuse is something which people just don't want to talk about, whether it is a female or a male, because it's something they feel is shameful, so they don't want to talk about it. So which leads to a lot of stigma. It's like could be for a long period of time, which could like they just it's very difficult for them to come out of it. So they do need help. Then there's fear, different kinds of fears we all have. So it could be fear of failure, fear of losing something. It could be fear of losing a relationship or not able to do something. So these could be the causes of stigma. Okay, here I have just left a blank over here. What do you think are these points related to? What is the heading which I have left blank over here? So you can unmute. I mean, raise your hand. So what is this of stigma? I mean, what is this blank you need to fill? You can read the points and guess what is the word which I have not put over here. Anybody wants to try? You can maybe type in the chat box. What is this of stigma? I've done this just to make it a little more interactive. Anybody wants to give me the answer or type in the chat box? I'm checking. Consequences, somebody says threats, is it? Not stages, I'm sorry. Consequences, yeah, to some extent is right. Stages I've already covered, I think. No, actually, there are stages again coming up. So this is impact or effects of stigma. Okay, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Yeah. So it is the impact or the effects of stigma, which I have left blank, just to make it interactive. So what happens is, oh, I mean, when a person is stigmatized, how do other people react? What is the impact in the society? So you could be labeled as crazy, dangerous. The person could be labeled as incompetent. So there's a lot of labeling. So the main words over here are labeling, discrimination, like there's exclusion, prejudice. Yeah, I've mentioned prejudice, bias. So these are the impacts of stigma. How do people treat stigma is as you're labeled as crazy, dangerous, or violent. You're a threat. Okay, so that is one thing. Then discrimination. Obviously, there's a lot of discrimination. People don't want to interact. We've seen even in children, they're excluded. They are treated differently. So there is a lot of discrimination and bias, and people don't want to maybe give them work to do because they feel they're incompetent. So that way, there's a lot of discrimination. Then they're made to feel inadequate or low. That's one thing, like you're not good enough. So the words they use, the comments they pass, all that are the impact of stigma in society. So they're made to feel worthless, shameful, which leads to low self-esteem and self-confidence naturally, which is very sad. And then inaccurate or inappropriate stereotypes by media, mostly. Or people in general or media also. And there is exclusion. So there's instead of inclusion, there's more of exclusion in society. People try to shun people with mental illness, and they try to avoid, they try to keep them, avoid basically interacting with them. So this is the impact or effects of stigma in society. Okay, self-stigma. Now, why I'm going to focus more on self-stigma is because self-stigma is difficult because when a person himself or herself stigmatizes, put so much stigma on themselves, and it's very difficult to help that person. If it is public stigma, it's at least you can do something, and you can create awareness, talk the others, and help this person. It's better, but still, self stigma is very, very difficult. So this is when, what is self stigma? Self stigma is when a person is holding negative beliefs, feelings, and opinions about himself or herself. Then self stigma can make you feel very, very embarrassed, ashamed. Your self esteem really goes low. You feel not incompetent, like I can't do it. You just give up. Because the belief is so negative. So it's so negative that it's very difficult to come out of it. So self stigma is worse than public stigma, is what I feel. Then it can make you feel completely disconnected. You don't want to talk to people because you're scared they will talk about it, they will give you some advice, they will tell you what to do, they will judge you first of all. So that is why it can, you don't want to be really talking to people, and try to disconnect and stay alienated away from society. And it can make it difficult to reach out for help and support. Even like the family wants to help that person, it becomes very difficult for them because of the self-inflicted stigma. People do it to themselves. And it can make you feel that no one understands your condition. You don't want to talk about it because you feel they won't understand. People don't understand. It's your problem. So which delays the process of treatment and cure or reversal of the situation. So Corrigan is a psychologist and an author who's written many books, has done a lot of study and research on self-stigma. So I thought I should mention it here. He's Corrigan and Penn, the two psychologists who have done extensive study and research on self-stigma. So he's come up with a model. This is not a solution given by him, but it is actually the stages of self-stigma. He says initially the first the stage is where the person becomes aware of the stereotypes, means aware of what people, even if you use a few words, people become very, conscious of the stereotype, like, okay, you are overweight. Suppose somebody is going through bipolar, or disorder like anorexia or bulimia, or something like body disorder. So they feel, when somebody passes a comment, they become very aware of that, and it becomes slowly becomes, they internalize it. The next stage would be they start, okay, accepting it and internalizing it, and slowly it becomes a belief, and they start agreeing with it, personal agreement. So these were the 5 stages which Corrigan has given, and he studied extensively and come up with these 5 stages of self-stigma. It is a theory, basically, a model. And then is a personal agreement, and then self-concurrence. Self-concurrence and personal agreement very similar. So concurrence means it's the next level of acceptance, where you agree and then you accept that this is how it is, this is my condition, nothing can be done. It's this is how it's going to be. Now, if I've reached this stage where I cannot do anything, then I don't think I can do anything. So that belief becomes, the negative belief becomes so strong that, and sometimes they go into depression, which leads to self-harm, in all these things, the low self-esteem is one common factor, because slowly the self-esteem goes lower and lower, which could lead to self-harm. So because Corrigan has done a lot of research on this, I thought, we should know about it. He, by the way, Corrigan is also an author of about 15 books. He's written on mental health, and stigma related to it. Okay, how do people with self-stigma cope with it? Means this I've brought out from my experience with with people with mental illness. So this is something which I have not got read from somewhere. It's my own thing. So it's like first thing is concealing the issue. They don't want to talk about it. And the first thing, how they cope is just avoiding the topic. Then there's denial. The other way is like they don't want to accept that actually they're going through stigma. There is a condition, maybe they're aware of the condition, but they're not aware of the stigma, that they're avoiding it and they're not accepting it. So the opposite will be the denial. Then sometimes they tend to talk only with friends and peer mates, but not with a professional. They are very reluctant to go to a professional, but they start talking to friends, but uh, they know we don't know how much that would help them. But yes, that's how this is a coping mechanism for them. They just try to talk to someone. So that could be one of the ways of doing it. Then rationalizing it, saying that, yeah, obviously I will feel like this because of my condition. They rationalize it and they feel it is okay to feel like that. It's okay not to talk about it. So that way they're rationalizing it. So that is one coping mechanism for them. Then self-harm. Yes, some of my, students have told me that cutting themselves gives them pleasure. It's a coping mechanism. I realized that uh, the intention is not to actually uh, to go to the extreme of it, but just cutting is, I believe, is a coping thing which they do. They say that they feel better. I mean, that's what they say, which is debatable, of course. So, but self-harm is one of the coping mechanisms, unfortunately, uh, which is there, which is prevalent. Then sometimes what happens, uh, they tend to talk to family members, but it gets into an argument. They get into an argument with family because it's not always that family may not understand their condition. They may not understand this thing. So usually it could be counterproductive because they are not mental professionals, right? So mental health professionals. So they may not be able to understand. So they get more anxious and it becomes counterproductive. It would not help the situation. In fact, it makes it worse and it could spoil the relationships also. Okay, now so what are the ways in which we can mitigate self-stigma is uh, the person who is going through could first acknowledge and accept, and because it is the illness, it is, you're not your illness, you have a name. I mean, this is how you could help a person to overcome self-stigma, is you tell them that, you are not your illness. You are much more. I mean, yeah, that's only a small thing which is happening to you. You're just going through a condition. So you don't have to, feel so bad for yourself. And consider facts. It is not a sign of weakness. You need to just consider the facts, show them that these things do happen. So you don't have to really feel so bad. And there is professional help available, and you can seek professional help. And don't take it so personally. It could happen to anyone. So you can talk about it, be open about it, and find a solution. Instead of focusing on the problem, you need to focus on the solution. So you can help a person who's going through a self stigma in this way, connect them with people. They can join support groups. First of all, take professional help is what I feel will surely help. Okay, now these are pictures of some celebrities. What is the common thing among them? Is a question for all of you. I hope you can see the names are mentioned, but what do you think is a common factor amongst all these? This is Prince Harry. This
You
is
can raise
J.K.
your hand,
Rowling.
you can unmute, or else you can.
Couldn't hear you. Could you be louder, please?
I'm asking who would like to answer, they can raise their hand so that we
Yeah. So that we can unmute. Should I give the answer, or is anybody wanting to answer? Yes, they have suffered with depression at some point. Yes. So what is the next thing? Yes, that is one factor. What else? This is Dwayne Johnson. He is a very successful wrestler and actor. Sudha, you're close. Yeah, she says promoting mental health. The answer is
They are
somebody here.
all positive thinking. Good smile.
Thank you. Yeah, but the actual thing is they have all spoken about their mental illness very openly in public. That is what is common amongst them is they have been bold enough, courageous enough to say that, yes, I went through depression. I went through, anxiety. So J.K. Rowling went to, and one common factor is they're all very successful. So what does that, what do we conclude from that? From what I've said just now? You can see that they're all been very successful. So what is, again, another common factor? What is the conclusion from this? That they spoke about their mental illness openly. In that way, they're promoting anti-stigma action, anti-stigma promotion. Yes. What does that mean? What does this mean? Yes, Alia ma'am. Yes, right. Alia ma'am says, yeah, anybody can be affected. That is the thing. Like even successful people, highly successful people can go through mental illness, right? Like any other physical illness. I'm going to go a little faster because I didn't have much time, I guess. So what is the role of media? I think media plays a major role in like increasing stigma or mitigating it. So the negative things are portraying inappropriate stereotypes about people. We know that, sometimes there are ads which show those things. Then sensationalizing the situation through unwarranted references. I'm not going to the detail of it because I'm short of time. Then using demeaning or hostile language. So media does play a major role, both a negative and a positive role do you all agree? How many of you agree with this? Raise your hands. That media plays a major role in stigma. Yes. We can, if we have time, we can debate on this. Then the positive things are actually media is also very powerful in creating awareness, right? We could actually use media to create a lot of awareness, encourage people to speak in public, and tell everyone that they are not alone, right? So actually, whatever these celebrities, actually, there are many more celebrities who have spoken. There's Anushka Sharma, there's Meghan Markle, Deepika, of course, then Alia Bhatt, Selena Gomez.
Deepa
So
would
all
like to
these
speak.
people have, yes, you raised your hand, right?
Yeah, Deepa, Deepa, go ahead.
Yeah. So all these people have spoken about their mental illness. So through media, people could talk about it publicly so that you're encouraging other people also to speak and express and make it something which is normal, like a physical illness, right? Okay, now what is the role of us as mental health professionals? What is that we can do as, to help this mitigate the situation. I feel early detection and intervention would be great, because sometimes we get to know of things after something has happened. Like, when Sushant Singh committed suicide, surely he was going through mental issues, and it was too late, right? So we could, prevent a lot of suicides by being vigilant, look for the red flags, and we ourselves also should read more, gain more knowledge, so that we are empowered and enriched to help others. So we create awareness, we can create advocacy groups, and through our associations, we can do, awareness weeks and awareness programs we could conduct, to just spread the word, basically, that it is just like any other illness, and you don't have to feel, so bad about it. So I think there are lots of things we can do. Eradicate myths and negative beliefs, and we can sensitize students in schools and colleges, right? So that if they're going through, or if they see somebody going through, they can help, right? So we need to be more involved, show more concern. We need to be more compassionate and empathetic towards these people, and be a role model for others also, to mitigate. We can do a lot of things, I feel, and of course, treatment and therapies are there. If somebody comes to you with, comes very reluctantly to you, so you can talk about stigma and tell them that, it's okay, and it is not a chronic disease that you're going through. It's something which is reversible, and which is almost, you can really come out of it. So a lot of things we can do as mental health professionals. Okay, what is the way forward now? What is one thing which everybody should do? I think there are points here. Okay, there are some points given here. So out of these, what do you think is the most important thing? I mean, what do you think is the way forward? One thing which everybody has to do. Ways to reduce stigma is there. One thing is discrimination, of course, but awareness, yes, Alia ma'am. So for that, acceptance, yes. One thing is talk about it openly. I think that's one thing which everybody needs to do, is just talk about it. Talk about it so much. Like before, earlier, cancer was supposed to be something which was kept very secretive, and people wouldn't talk about it. There's a lot of stigma attached to cancer. But now, because it's become pretty common, like, so people are not very now scared of it, or scared to talk about it, right? So like that, I think it should be with mental illness also. Okay, now here, this is Anushka Sharma, I'm sure you all know. So what did she say? She says more and more people should talk openly about it. There's nothing shameful about it or something to hide. If you had a constant stomach pain, wouldn't you go to the doctor? It's that simple. I want to make this my mission, to take any shame out of this, to educate people about this. So this is what, I think is very important, that we just talk about it. So here, I think I would end my session. Is there anybody who would like to share, one or two people who would like to share experiences with regard to stigma? Raise your hands, please, if you want.
Yeah, you can unmute and speak. Now we can open access so that you can unmute and speak.
Ma'am,
So please go ahead.
ma'am, one query from my side, ma'am. Hello, can you hear me, ma'am?